Today's topic is about money and, how money affects us in our lives. What's our relationship with money? Some of the kind of background as to what we learned about money as we grew up. These are kind of things that we don't normally talk about as first and second generation immigrants and diasporas of the world, of migrants and all that. So this is a community for us to come together and talk about different topics and to hear one another's lived experiences. And I find that through these lived experiences and sharing these lived experiences, hearing others speak and share, we can actually feel a little less lonely as we live in between worlds. And we can find celebration in kind of our experiences and be able to celebrate our background and hopefully move forward together as a community. So I'm going to let Nuria take it away. Oh, and let me just introduce, we've got Nuria who chose the topic today. And we have Corey with us today. She has been coming to our meetups. If you want to join in on the conversation, our next meetup is on Tuesday next week from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern time. So you can join us there. And we met the lovely Corey through there. So we're excited to have her with us. And then we have Sonia as well with us. So let's dive into the topic today.
Thank you, Vanessa. You always with your lovely introductions. I love them. Well, yes, this topic about money came up because I realized that in many ways, I talk about money all the time. And I don't work in that field, like in the financial field, but the way that money shows up in my life is through buying groceries, paying my bills, buying something I like, or, probably like big investments. And the experience in my body every time that I'm going to pay something is particular. So when I get present to that, like, how do I experience paying something with cash than with my credit card is different, right? Like, I don't think about money when I just tap with my credit card or my debit card, but I think about money or the energy of it when I touch the money, right? And of course, I don't know if it's a Mexican thing or what, but I add meaning, or I put some meaning to some symbols, such as how do I place the bills in my wallet, or if all my past expenses are in my wallet, I feel like I'm avoiding to put my finances in order. And that leads me to another space, which is, how do I receive abundance in my life? Is the way that I live in abundance comes from lacking and therefore from scarcity. And when I look at that, it's like, okay, growing up, how was the relationship with money that my parents, my grandma, and every family member had, right? If it was just coming from the sacrifice, coming from don't invest in particular items because it's not good, or don't earn lots of money, because if you get if you become a rich person, you're going to be a bad person, because the reputation of money is not necessarily good through their lenses, right? So all of these connotations around money, I got really present to it. So I would like to ask you, like, my first question for you guys is, how does it feel to have money on your hands. And whatever happens after that question, please just go for it, like having the money. Or when was the last time that you literally touched money? Because it seems like we're no longer familiar with really having it, touching it, and maybe if you can, without looking at your wallet, thinking of how much money do I have now in my wallet? And why did I put just that amount of money in my wallet? So the floor is yours, guys, whoever wants to go.
I can go first, just because I happen to actually touch money not too recently. And it's so interesting how you kind of talk about the, looking at paying for things with credit card and then paying things with cash. And it's rare for me to use cash, except lately it's been really just when we go to family dinners and we split the bill, and then it's like I just happen to receive cash from my sister or something because I paid for credit card. So it's so interesting. So I keep a certain amount of cash for just that, for family dinners or for gifts, like money, cash gifts, because it's, in my culture, Chinese, like we give people money. It's like that's kind of the thing, right? So, but it's so interesting because like, I actually have a stash kind of in my drawer where it's meant, perfectly like unfolded $50 bills, like $100 bills for presents, just for that. So it's really interesting because it's like that has stuck with me, because that's kind of what we do. And so there's that. But yeah, like you said, paying with a credit card, it's so easy. It's just like a tap now, right? And so you don't even really think about it. I mean, I learned, to be a little bit more mindful at looking at my receipts and all that, but even normally I don't even glance at my receipts when I pay, right? Like it's very much like, oh, here it is. They spout out a number and it's like, tap, done, right? But I learned from my partner, because he's very much like, let's just double check that they charged you the right amount, right? So it's definitely, I love that you brought up this topic because it's something that I haven't really given much thought lately about. And when I think about money, it's kind of like when I used to be a lighting designer, you don't, like, my experience with it is like, you don't really think about it until it's like bad lighting, right? Like you walk into a space and everything's fine until it's like you walk into a space and it's like there's blinking lights or it's like super blue light, and then you notice it. So I think that's, for me, like right now, my relationship with money is very much like, oh, like if it's something bad is going on and it's like I need to actually think about money, that's where it's like there. Then I go into survival mode, and then I'm like, oh crap, I gotta like spend hours on like working out numbers and all that. So but day to day, it's not something that I think about, but when I do have opportunities to think about it, survival mode comes in. Definitely. Like it's just, yeah, that's kind of where I'll just leave it at that and see.
Yeah, I think your question is such a great way to start off this conversation. Our relationship that we have with cash and our relationship that we have with credit is such a fascinating question, because in Germany, we are obsessed with saving. It is so ingrained in our national psyche, and I grew up with this mindset, which is very different from other countries such as the US, for example. And I have to say that in Germany, although it is more and more common to pay with credit cards or debit cards and also to make online payments, cash is still king. You still need to have at least some cash on you whenever you're in Germany, when you go to a restaurant or to a bakery or local stores. I would always recommend to have some cash on you, not rely too much on debit and credit cards. And also it has to do a lot with our history and also with the fact that we think that we should earn money first and then spend it on things that we really need, and save up money for, like, for example, if you want to buy a new car, you save up your money until you have the money to actually be able to buy the car. Whereas, for example, I don't know, in the US, I've heard it a lot of times that people already take a credit to buy a car, which in Germany is really, yeah, it doesn't happen that often. It's not that common. You maybe take out a credit to buy a house, but for everyday things, you never take out credit. This is just unheard of in Germany. So it's a very different mindset. And also already growing up, I had a piggy bank, and my parents, they taught me the value of money, and you have to save up money, and it's like work, for 30 years and then live your life fully, and then you'll have enough money in your bank account, because we like to save money. So it's very interesting. And then it was a very interesting experience when I came to Mexico first, because there you really need money. And if you go to a local store or you use the public transport, you cannot pay with big notes, because usually they don't have, how do you say cambio?
Change.
Yeah, change. They don't have change. So you have to make sure that you have the exact amount, 7 pesos for a bus ride or something, or the taxi driver even has a little note in his taxi saying, please pay me the exact amount because I don't have change. So so we have more direct contact with the money. We actually touch it even in Germany, and more so in in countries like Mexico, Guatemala. Money is cash. Cash is still king. I mean, you cannot survive without cash. And also it's a little bit less safe to always pay with credit cards or debit cards. So yeah, that's a fascinating question. So yeah, these are my initial thoughts on the question that Nuria asked us. Yeah, but I'm very conscious about how much money I have in my wallet. Always have been, and also know exactly what's in my bank account. But that's really my German upbringing, I think.
Corey, may I ask a follow-up question before I pass it along to Sonia?
Sure.
Because I'm really curious now that you mentioned like culture, right? At the end of the day, it's about culture.
Yeah.
Do you feel like sometimes that mindset of saving was like limiting your way of living at a certain point?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I always felt stressed whenever I thought about studies or, going on vacation or investing like in my education, or I felt guilty, and I thought, no, I think my parents wouldn't agree with that. Because I was brought up like, you have to be responsible, and you're not responsible if you spend money right away or if you don't save up and only spend it on things you really need. So every time I invested like in a language course, or I did a voluntary service in Thailand or whatever, I felt guilty, and I thought, was that really necessary? Is that a really good investment? Or was it just a waste of money? Am I responsible? And because we even have the word, to earn money, it reveals this culture of meritocracy. You have to deserve it. You have to merit it before you can actually spend it. So a lot of times I felt limited in certain choices, and should I go study my bachelor's degree in Germany, or because I always wanted to do my studies abroad in England, which I eventually did. because it is so expensive, like in England, to study at university, whereas it's basically free in Germany. So that influenced my choice, and I ended up studying my bachelor's degree in Germany. So it's to avoid because why spend $30,000-$40,000 for a university education when you have great universities in Germany? And besides, I didn't earn any income then because I was still a student, and I thought I can't do that to my parents. And they brought me up that way to be, be responsible and make smart choices about your financial life. So yeah, that's a great question. I did feel limited because of this mindset of financially secured at all times, because we're obsessed with also financial security and saving. So yeah, but now I have a different relationship with money than I had as a student or when I was younger. Yeah, but a great question. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Oh, no, pretty much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sonia.
Yeah, oh my God, this is so good. Like, there's so many directions I want to take this in. But yeah, no, it's such a great topic. So to answer like your first question, Nuria, I think when I don't handle cash that much, but I would say that in general, I like cash, and I think on a surface level, I grew up as someone who was open about liking money. And I have this kind of story even when I was young, because I would work for my aunt, and my mom would be like, oh my God, she knew that I would love working so I could buy something like a cell phone or something kind of like something fancier. And I was very good with kind of like sticking to my plan and like saving. And I was also very good, and this is like a running gag that my whole family has with me, that is that if I would lend money to like my brothers and sisters when I was young. And they were always like, oh, if you owe money to Sonia, like she's gonna make sure that she gets it back. And I think that's just so hilarious, because on one hand, I grew up kind of being comfortable with this identity of like, I'm someone who likes money, which I'm grateful, because I find sometimes, I don't know, like when you're socialized as a woman, like there's so much shame with the kind of like, being frivolous or being this or that. So I'm kind of glad that I have that embrace, but this is not to say that I have no money drama, because we're not we're not completely safe from that. And I think for me, where kind of like the discomfort around money shows is also, I think Corey really brought up a great point about the whole kind of like the meritocracy of money kind of thing. This whole idea of like hard work and kind of like you have to earn it and so on. And I think for me, it's, yeah, like I still have a lot of kind of like that shame associated with like hard work and being like, well, it shows up in ways like, oh, the businesses are doing well, but then it's like, but maybe if I work harder, they could be doing better, and we could be like employing people and this and that. So there's still like that classic kind of like comparison thing where you're always like, oh, maybe if I had, like if I work harder or I had more or something, like things would be better kind of thing. And that is something that I have to kind of like constantly, like remind myself, like, okay, am I really here like just for the money? Like, yes, I like money, but I'm not purely motivated by that. There's I don't know, like I feel like with the pandemic and the kind of like almost like 2 years that we had like in confinement, I came out of that period being more focused on things like relationships, friendships, and just spending time, like leisure time with no purpose other than having fun, than before the pandemic, where I was like how am I going to have like my 3 businesses to work and like generate money and work hard? It's like I was a lot more focused on kind of like that I need to work harder. So yes, I make money, but also like this whole thing of like, I don't know, like if I work harder, I'm going to feel like I'm a better person or something. And now after the pandemic, I'm like, okay, maybe the amount of money that we make, it's good for like my lifestyle, the lifestyle that I have with my husband. And maybe we don't need to kind of like be so kind of like raspy about it. But I would say one of the biggest lessons for me when it comes to money and like that whole morality associated with money is it's realizing, because I have different businesses, but I would say the most successful one right now, it's a camper van rental business that I have here in Montreal with my husband. And I think what's really tricky when you have a business where you have to like spend money to make money is that all those notions of like personal finance, like you need to save up, you need to have funds, you need to blah, 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 like you need to not spend money that you don't have, and so on. All of those notions get completely twisted when you have a business, because you kind of realize that you will not go anywhere if you apply that same logic. Like if I were to always be like, I won't spend more than what I'm currently making, then you never get started with your business, right? At some point you have to kind of like invest, upfront and take the risk and be like, maybe I will make my money back in like 1 or 2 years or 3 years, and you don't know. And that for me was that kind of broke my mind a little bit, because yeah, I really had to like, it revealed to me all that, I think, collective conditioning that we have around like, you're supposed to save, but think of the future, but think of this, don't spend money on frivolous things, like, you know. So yeah, that was a long answer, but there's a lot of things to unpack here. So
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you. And this is amazing. I would like us to touch on culture, because, for instance, when Corey was mentioning about Mexico, right, that people doesn't have like money or change, or it's tricky because also there is a system, right? Like the public transport is unionized, and if you pay with cash, there is no tax, right? So there is no way to say to the government, oh yeah, the entire day and I generated this amount of money, right? So it's tricky. And also here, like something that fascinates me in Chinatown, for example, it's weird to find a place where you can tap. They don't have terminals, so you pay by cash and period, right? And I noticed I have the privilege of having many Chinese background friends, and I feel like the relationship with money has a lot to do with this aspect that you mentioned, Vanessa, of giving money is allowing the energy of money to flow. And for me, that's fascinating. Like the touching the cash, for me, that's fascinating. And so talking about culture, I remember this, I didn't experience this in Mexico, but my grandma and my mom did. That people used to have lots of money, like they didn't trust in the banks, right? So their savings were like under the bed, under the mattress, or in the dresser. So and everybody knew, like, you don't go there to try to get your grandma's money because she's gonna cut your hand, period, right? And another thing was that people used to have like their teeth made by gold or any kind of metal, right? Like expensive metal. So when people pass away, kids used to go to the cemeteries to find like pieces, or to like, what if there is like a gold, right? So when I came to Canada, something that was fascinating for me was thrifting. Like thrift stores is like absolutely normal and cool, and you go through these like really sustainable cycle of things, right? Like it's not just wasting, and it applies to food as furniture or clothing. So whereas in Mexico, it's a status, like you don't go thrifting, period. You don't do that. Even if you don't have nothing to eat, but you don't go thrifting. That's pretty much it. So when I came here and saw that, I got present to the energy of things. Like, this dress is beautiful. And it's sometimes they have like tags on it. Like, and it's, I don't know, you can find like a Michael Kors sweater, right? In the Salvation Army with a tag on it. So it's just, so the value is not exactly itself the brand. It's what you make it mean. So I want to ask you, based on your cultural experiences growing up or in the countries where you are living in at the moment, like how much that has shaped or changed your approach to money, or to invest in money, or to put the energy of money in other aspects in your life, or saying, I'm going to take this class or this course, which is an investment in your personal development or in your professional development, but it's like, I need to take from my savings, otherwise I cannot afford it. And that right away puts you in a scarcity mindset. And then you don't do nothing with that course, because all the time that you go to your class, you're thinking of, oh my God, this hour cost me how much money? So think about that cultural aspects. How does it show up in your lives now?
Yes. So it's so interesting. I think back to, I don't know if it's really a cultural thing for me. I'm just going to share from my own experience. Like, so for those of you who are watching, I'm second generation Chinese Canadian. And it was really interesting because I think growing up, I didn't never really had to think about money, because I guess culturally in our family, we don't actually talk about money. And I know that that's very common in a lot of Asian cultures. So when you talked about status, Nuria, it's so interesting because it made me think about how we don't actually talk about money, but it's very much a status thing. So I think this is where the career and the title of your job actually comes in as a status thing. Like most people would know how much you're getting paid just based on your professional kind of label. So amongst my Chinese Canadian friends, it was very much like that. Oh, I'm a CA, or I'm a lawyer, and that's kind of how money played as a status, but we would never really talk about numbers or anything. If anything, growing up, we were taught to earn our own money, to like become very independent and learn how to have your own money. So that was definitely, like, for me, I felt like that was a blessing. And it's interesting because I feel like maybe, I don't know if it's similar in other households, but my dad was kind of like, he was an entrepreneur, and I lived with him. My parents were separated or divorced, and I lived with my dad, and he was very much underneath my grandmother's roof for a while, until he got remarried, and then he had his own space. But he was always an entrepreneur. So his mindset of money was very much like, money's always coming, money's always coming. So I had that growing up. So I think that might be a little different than some other people's experiences. just because like for him to be an entrepreneur at that time, well, I guess a lot of people are entrepreneurs, but he was very much into like the personal development part. Kind of, he was on the front end of like personal development. He was like listening to Tony Robbins. So it was very much a lot of the, you know, Tony Robbins mindset, right? So we had that in our, you know, running in our car deck. He was playing those tapes over again. So I have to say it was very different. And that's probably how it influenced me kind of growing up, not really like looking at money, not really kind of just knowing that, oh, if I have a good job, then I know that'll be taken care of. And I only talk about money when I like talk about salary, and that's it. And I might mention the salary to my parents and just to say, hey, like I'm good. But yeah, we didn't really talk about money. It was just more like you could tell if someone was good based on the job that they had. So I don't know if that's really kind of answering the question about culturally. Like I know for me now, it was not until I actually gone into my own business as an entrepreneur, did I actually start looking at money and start actually like looking at numbers. And so I feel like for me right now, I've kind of like been in this journey with money where I started off being very unattached to money. And then as I had my own business, becoming attached to money, and kind of similar to what Sonia was saying, it was all about like revenue and how much money am I going to bring in every year and forecasting and all that, to kind of like now I'm just kind of like, okay, I've done that and I'm not sure that really works for me. And I love the way I had my relationship with money before, where it was just, I just trusted that it was coming. So I think right now I'm kind of like in transition of like doing the detaching again, because I'm going to say it's hard as an entrepreneur not to look at money. It's not that I'm not looking at money, but it's like having that like icky, like graspy feeling that Sonia was talking about. It's like, how can I actually feel safe with money again, like I once was, now in this space of like being an entrepreneur? And yeah, it's no different kind of thing.
Yeah, from the cultural perspective, I had to laugh when you mentioned your experience in Mexico, or what you said about Mexicans, you know, because I had that experience with some Mexican friends. We went to like a big commercial mall, and then they wanted to shop, you know, for some clothes, new clothes and shoes. And in Mexico, I got so accustomed to looking always for good deals, like in the local market, in the local little stores where it's a little bit cheaper, but they would always go to the big commercial center, drive 2 hours in their car, and that in itself was a great experience for them. And then to get shiny shoes for like very expensive, you know, it's like, why don't you get your shoes like right next door, you know, where it's like 1,000 pesos less and they're new. It's not a thrift shop, but it was attached to status, because they are so conscious about the status, and that you in your inner circle and also in your social circle, you can show that you got shoes from the commercial center in Tuxtla or whatever, and that made all the difference to them. Whereas for me, it was a little bit absurd, because in Germany, again, it has to do with culture. I remember when when my parents, you know, didn't have to work, we would go camping for a weekend even, you know, and then rent a little cabin. It was not a 3-star or 5-star hotel. And we were so happy and so relaxed and enjoyed it really fully, the whole experience, because it's more about quality and the experience that you get, while being there, in nature, and having the weekend off, being with your family. Whereas some US friends of mine commented, saying, oh yeah, we do the same, just it's just the opposite. We go, sometimes we go to a nice hotel, 5-star hotel, and it has great reviews, and then they enjoy it due to the fact that it is a 5-star hotel. It's more because of the status, not, and then it turns out that it's not even the nicest hotel. It's poor quality. It's just it's not a very nice. It doesn't really look nice. Yeah, the bedrooms are not nicely done, and yet they still enjoyed it so much, because they said, well, I spent so much money after all, so I should enjoy it. And it's, after all, it has great reviews, and it is a 3 or 5-star hotel. Whereas for us, it would be really absurd to do the same, knowing that it's not best quality, and then we would prefer 100 times to spend the same weekend, on a little cabin in the woods or whatever. So that's very fascinating to me. And also money, we don't talk about money either in Germany. We even have very creative, inventive slangs for money, such as coal, mice, or ashes, if I have to translate it like literally. Instead of money, you say mice or coal or something like that, because and it's funny, because I don't know what my friends earn, because we don't talk about it, and it's very uncomfortable for us talking about how much you earn per month. I honestly have no idea what my closest friends earn. It's just like a taboo. So it also has this bad connotation. But in my everyday life, where I'm really aware of what I spend and what I also what I spend, and then I have a monthly budget even, but that's all, again, it has to do with my upbringing, the way my parents raised me and educated me about, money and financial stuff. But since living abroad, I think I also have changed the relationship with money, because although money is not like the main cause of happiness, it does contribute to happiness. I mean, you need money to not only cover your basic needs, but also really to have a more fulfilling life, and to be able to invest, and to be able to participate in social activities, in leisure activities, to fully participate as a citizen in everyday life. And that is so much harder if you are really deprived of that, so money shouldn't be like a taboo or something really bad. I mean, it is really fundamental. It is important. We shouldn't feel as that ashamed about it, especially as women, or
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I mean, I was going to say something like culturally, although, whenever I think of my culture, I'm like, wait, which one I choose? Because I'm Venezuelan, Peruvian, Chilean, living in Canada. So I'm But I think what I can say, kind of at a personal, more from my personal experience, kind of what Vanessa was sharing. Similar to Vanessa, I think I also grew up with a bit of a different mindset around money, because of the fact of having parents who were entrepreneurs. And my dad, much like your dad, Vanessa, was also a lot into the law of attraction, and kind of that kind of, I mean, literally, I think I probably read those books when I was 6 or something. They were just laying around in the house. So I think I'm grateful that I kind of grew up with that mindset of money not being taboo. But still, I mean, at the same time that I'm saying oh, money wasn't taboo, at the same time there was also the fact that like we said, we don't know how much our friends earn, or I mean, it's not like things that we would talk about that often. So I guess it wasn't taboo, but I guess it wasn't something like super, yeah, just super like out there either. Maybe among there were many entrepreneurs in my family. In my mom's side, they all had like their own businesses. So I guess, yeah, they probably would speak about money and revenue and goals, whatever they when they were together. But that was more like the close family. Um, I would say definitely there is this issue with like status for sure, that is almost like status it's more important than money. Like money is a vehicle to get into the whole status thing, but the status thing being such an important thing, I don't know if that is something like very uh, I don't know, Latino culture, maybe many cultures have this thing, but I really had the feeling that my parents work a lot to kind of build something, even the house and all of that. I kind of have the feeling that they really built it so they could like impress people or something like that. Like, and I mean, not that there's anything wrong with kind of like being like, I want to have a backyard so I receive my friends and so on. But there was a lot of kind of like that attachment of like, yeah, like you're supposed to like impress people. And similar to what Nuria you were saying, the whole thrifting thing too, that is something that well, I grew up, I mean, I grew up here with the mentality of like thrifting is amazing, but I definitely remember like my dad especially being like, but why are you doing that, and like, and this and that. But thinking about my more like an observation I can make in particular with my own experience is that, so my dad was an entrepreneur and he read the law of attraction books and so on. I mean, my mom too, but he was more of kind of like the spreadsheet guy and thinking of, how to really grow the business. My mom is also an excellent entrepreneur, but she's a lot more kind of in the flow. She's like, yeah, I will find clients, I will do this and that, and she makes it happen with like her own magic, but she has like no structure, whereas my dad was more of like, we need a plan and blah 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 blah. But something that an interesting observation is that my dad grew up, when he was really really young, he was rather poor. He came from a very kind of like poor uh village, and he kind of I think he always had it in him that he wanted to move away from that. So I think in his case it's almost like he did like a completely kind of like the like swing completely to the other side, where it's like, to this day, things like camping or something like that, for him, he would be like, why? Why would I want to go camping? And like, much like what Corey was saying, I'm like, well, because you can see the stars, you can connect with nature, have so many other benefits that are amazing when you actually go out in nature and you have that experience. But in his head, it's almost like, uh, he has like this automatic reaction where he's like, no, I don't want to be like in the woods, I don't want to be, he's like, I want my comfort, I want like a 5-star hotel kind of thing. And it's almost like this program running in his mind where it's like, no, that's always better and blah blah blah. And yeah, me too, like Corey, sometimes I'm like, if we look at this thing rationally, we can probably have a better experience if we invest in blah blah blah, this kind of vacation. But he's going to be like, no, it needs to be like this kind of thing, and so on. So yeah, I guess it's like depending on like where you come from. And I mean, it's only with time that I've been able to see this, that I'm like, oh, okay, I can see why he's so kind of like against anything that reminds him maybe of his like kind of difficult childhood, more like in poverty, that he's like, I don't want to have to go through that again, and I don't want my daughter or something, I'm like, I'm going camping, and he's like, why are you doing that kind of thing. And so yeah, it might be like a reaction like that, but yeah, it's I'm grateful that I grew up with the money mindset of kind of like abundance and so on. But definitely this is one topic that every time I think that I have done like work and I'm like, I'm good, like then there's like something else. Like the other day I received a letter that like one of my payments for my student loan didn't go well, or I mean didn't pass through something. I didn't program it like I should have. And it's like I had so much drama. I was like totally beating myself up in my head where I was like, oh my God, like I missed this thing. And it's like that's still a reaction that I have in, yeah, that automatic reaction of like, oh my God, you like, whereas, my husband, he would be like, oh, I made a mistake, like, yeah, they'll fix it. But me, I'm like, what if like, they're gonna block my account, they're gonna think that I'm like stealing or something. And it's like I can see how like ridiculous it is, but at the same time it's kind of like that, like you said, I think Vanessa, you said the survival mode, or Nuri, I don't remember who said that, but it's like that survival mode that gets activated. So yeah, it's definitely many aspects about this topic that are constant work in progress.
Corey, did you want to say something?
Yeah, a very quick comment because while Sonia was talking, some other thoughts came to mind. Also, I was thinking that it's not only culture, but also there are like socioeconomic aspects. For example, when I compare Germany to Guatemala, where I'm right now, I also realized that maybe the thing with the status, this emphasis on status also has to do with the fact that Latin America as a region is very, has great inequality. The disparities are so huge within the society, within the same state even, not even, whereas in Germany, the national wealth is relatively equally distributed. We have a very large middle class and a small percentage of poor people and a small percentage of rich people, but it's nothing compared to Latin America or South Africa or other regions. So I think that might have to do with that also. You can show that you're wealthy, that you're doing fine, and you merited it. And so that's why you place more emphasis maybe on material things and on status in Guatemala or in Mexico, whereas in Europe, it's pretty much standard that every family has their own car and house, or at least a good apartment. So the differences between different families on the same street or in the same city are not that stark. So I think that might be one of the factors playing into that. And then also, it's so interesting to hear your experiences as entrepreneurs, Sonia and Vanessa, because I've never been an entrepreneur. And then I thought to myself, that's also a privilege because we have those freedoms in our countries. Whereas in Guatemala, mainly like in the among the indigenous population or in the rural areas, there are still women who cannot even decide over their financial life because it's their husbands who manage the money and often does not invest in the housing, education of their children. So that's a big issue still, that women do not have this right, although on paper they theoretically have this right, but there's still a large part of the population in Guatemala. I'm referring to women who are financially illiterate because they just don't have access to financial education. They're not given credit. It's very hard to start your own to work as an entrepreneur and to get recognized by society, by your village. So that came to mind while Sonia was talking and sharing her experiences with us. So I'm really grateful that at least I, as a German, have a say over my financial life, and I can invest and I can make the decisions without having a male person, making those decisions for me just because I'm a woman. So yeah, these were just some ideas that came to mind.
I love it, Corey, because there is also, I think the status follows the social expectation of money, right? So if you have a specific gender, you're supposed to be doing this and that, right? Or if you're in the workforce and if you're a woman, of course, there's like Doesn't matter if you're doing the same, if you're performing the same role as your male counterpart. At the end of the day, he is going to earn more money than you. So it's and in a household, and I know perfectly what you are saying, because that happens also not only in rural areas in Latin America, but also in middle class or with rich people. Is like if you earn more money than your partner as a woman, you don't show that, because it's like if you were more than your husband. So it's like, no, like for people, it means like he's lazy or he's incapable to, right? And when there's nothing to do with that. So I agree with you, like the disparities in the countries between classes is crazy, right? Like that was something that for me in Canada was like, wow, I can believe it, right? Like you go to even though there are disparities and they're getting like more evident, still you go on the public transit and you can see you can see an executive director with their lunch and a guy who's going to work at the factory sitting together, right? So that's a normal picture, right? But I wanna touch on something that you mentioned, Corey, that my body felt like, wow, and it took me 40, I'm turning 45, so it took me 44 years to really get, also like running businesses, that money follows joy, not on the other way around. Like seriously, when I get present to moments in my childhood where when Santa Claus came and give me something that I love, I received it with so much joy that toy stick with me like for years, right? And now that I'm running some businesses and also in my work, is when I put joy, like money comes, because I'm really on the spirit of, I want more of that. And it took me all of those years to say, I love money. But when I say I love money, it comes from the space of honoring what I do, of me serving other people, and with a massive energy of gratitude. And that totally changed the way that I receive and create more, instead of fighting against having money. So one day, one person told me, like a tip: if you wanna have money, you have to learn how does it feel to have money. So he said, like, tell me a number, like how much do you think a rich people carries on their wallet? And I gave a number. I said, okay, what would it take for you to have that amount of money in your wallet? So I started doing it. And every time I went to buy something, I was like, okay, you dress gonna bring me money? And the dress was like, no. So I have the experience of, I don't have, in Mexico, we have this experience of, it seems like you get money and it's fire. You have to expend it right away, right? Whereas now for me, it's like, I have the money, I can keep the energy of it and ask the object or the item, if I buy you give me money or not. But it doesn't come from the scarcity. It comes from the joy of it, from the creating and expanding and generating more. So of course it took me years, and still I catch myself on, oh, here I am, right? Like depriving myself of fun and joy. So just to wrap up, I would like to ask you if you still, regardless of how you grew up in your relationship with money, if there are moments where you catch yourself limiting to not create more because loving money is not perceived as a good thing. That would be my last thought.
Yeah, for me, I think right now the idea of loving money feels like I feel a little resistant to it. I love, like, when I make purchases, I have that feeling of gratitude and appreciation even when I do tap, like, it's like, yeah, isn't it cool that I can use this and tap and I'm able to receive something for this. Like going out to eat, like having those experiences, it's like I wouldn't take any of that back, right? Like, so it's very much, I'm appreciative and I love money that way. So it's interesting because when I kind of thought about it, it was like, so why is it that I do have a little bit of resistance? Like maybe love, it's like I love having money to use. Maybe it's more just having to think about money. I have the resistance to, like, maybe I don't know, for me maybe it's more like, oh, if you think about money, you have like, there's this voice in my head that's like, oh, the more you like think positive thoughts about money, the more you're gonna have, right? And I think this is where it's like, why does having more money have to be so much work, like thought work in like bringing in money? Like, can I, like Nuria said, be in this place of joy and not think about it and just trust, like leave it to money to provide, like to bring in. And for me, it's been kind of like this work of letting go of even knowing where it comes from. That attachment of like just letting the abundance truly be that. Like, I love the visual of like, it's air. Like I can breathe it in, I can breathe it out, and it's available to me all the time. And I don't need to know where my air comes from. I just move through my day and it's here, and I trust that it's here, and I'm grateful that I have air to breathe. So I think that's where it's like, yeah, the resistance for money just comes from like having to like think about money to attract money. Like I think I'd like it to be easy in the sense of like, it is air, like I could just trust that it's there. And if I'm doing something that I love and I'm sharing joy, yeah, really kind of mastering in that concept of like money follows joy.
Go ahead, Sonia.
Okay, thank you. I think something similar to what you're saying. I mean, something similar to what Vanessa's saying. A practice that has been helping me to kind of decrease that resistance. It's just to not be so judgmental of the type of activities I do in a day, because like I said at the beginning, for me, the drama I have the most about money is that as an entrepreneur, you could potentially always be working on your business and always doing more. And so there's always this kind of like judgment of like, whenever I'm not working or doing something productive, that then it's kind of like where the shame starts, kind of thing. And so what I've been doing, kind of in the spirit of just joy and just being, I have just kind of started to kind of like catch myself whenever I'm like being like, I don't know, let's say I'm like scrolling or I'm like reading a random Wikipedia article that has nothing to do with anything I have to do at hand. But I'm always kind of like trying to see what am I getting from it? Like, what's the joy? And just kind of like honoring that it's like, like sometimes mindlessly scrolling, it's actually a good thing. I mean, not to be like so judgmental where you're like, everything has to be like super high purpose, it's like, no, sometimes like just, yeah, like every little thing that I do, it's part of like the ecosystem of my day, and everything has its place and it's good. And I don't know, for me, it's kind of like that's how I'm able to kind of like find the joy, or at least be more in like in that equanimity of just being like, it's all good. And like you said, Vanessa, like it's not like you have to actively have to be thinking about, yeah, like doing thought work and so on, but it's more just being in that like receptive state where you're just like, you feel light, you feel calm, you're inspired, you do one thing then the other. I think I personally create better in that space than whenever I try to tell myself that I need to be doing this and that is what's gonna get me money, and this gets you money and this does not get. It's like every time I try that, like I always like, no. So yeah, just like finding the joy in every moment, however that looks like.
I love how you said, Nuria, you know, honoring, it comes from a place of honoring yourself, of honoring what you do, your work, how you contribute ultimately also to society, you know, doesn't benefit only you, but in the end, it also benefits society. You touch people with what you do. Right now, where I am in my life, I don't think I would be able to say I love money, something I've never ever said, because again, it has to do with my upbringing and my psyche, you know, because again, it's almost like taboo to talk about how much you earn and how much you invest in personal things and stuff like that in Germany. I don't want to generalize, by the way, but you know, compared to other cultures or countries, but I do love the fact that money can open up so many possibilities, and it does improve your life and well-being. And ultimately, when you say I love money, which is great, you know, that you have gotten so far now, it's also investing in yourself, loving yourself, because what you get in return, depending on how you invest or in what you invest, it can multiply, you know, it comes back in multiple ways. And I think I changed my perspective on money when I started working as a fundraising manager, because there you always have to make the ask, which is the most uncomfortable thing to do. You feel like you're molesting people by asking for donations, but in the end, it's just very unsustainable if you don't make the ask, and if you don't convince people, individual people, groups, or whole companies or international organizations, if you don't convince them to contribute to a cause. And then ultimately comes back in so many ways. It affected me personally whenever we got, you know, funds and donations. It affected the entire community where we were working, and we could see the results, you know, the impacts in the lives of the families, you know, that had their vegetable garden and learned more about sustainable crop systems, and about, you know, and then they had books in the library in the local schools in southern Mexico and Chiapas. That was a wonderful thing. And there you see how money can come back in multiple ways, you know. Yeah, so I loved how you phrased it. And I just a week ago, for the first time in my whole life, no, not in my whole life, no, but for the first time here in Guatemala, I went to a sushi restaurant, and it's so expensive. It costs even more than it would cost me in Germany, my own country. But I said, you know what, I deserve it, and I love sushi, and this is a great experience. It's not something I do every day, and it doesn't matter, you know, that it costs really a lot. And as you said, joy followed, and it was such a great experience with friends, you know, and not having to worry, you know, not having to feel guilty. And money is not dirty in that sense. So money is dirty if you exploit people and if you kill people over money. That's a totally different thing. So it really much depends on, you know, where it comes from, you know. But besides what you were talking about, in your case, it was, you know, from a place from honoring what you do, and that's great.
Vanessa, if you want, like, let's wrap up because I want to be mindful of the time and.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I just didn't know if you had anything else to
Well, just
say. Yeah.
like a final thought based on what Corey said, that seriously, like in fundraising, there is this term, like the social return of investment, right? Like when you reach out to donors, it's like, what is the social return of investment of this money, right? And I think my invitation is to think about the return of investment in joy, right? I mean, it's why not, right? It's when you work hard and not necessarily working hard, right? Because also that's a connotation of if you have to work hard to get a particular amount of money. It's just work with adjectives, right? Working with adjectives and investing the money without adjectives and just for the fun of it, because that creates more for everybody. I think it's a ripple effect.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Nuria. As always, like we can go on, and that's why we have next week's session. So for those of you who want to join us to continue this conversation or to share your experiences, if this conversation has really kind of tickled your brain a bit, your mind a bit, and you've got some thoughts, we welcome you to come and join us in the conversation. So we're going to be meeting on Tuesday, like I said, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and the link is in the description. And yeah, so I definitely think that this is such a huge topic, and we can keep going. So come on out. We invite you to join us. And thank you so much, ladies, for your presence and to share. There's so much juiciness in all of this. And I really appreciate you coming together today. So we will
Thank you,
see
Corey.
you all.
Yes, no,
and
thank
Corey,
you
for joining us. Yeah.
for
like, it's
inviting
been-
me.
Yes, so we
It
hope
was
you
a
come
great
out
conversation.
again
Yeah,
for these
definitely.
live calls, and maybe even in our live stream space we can grow as well. So yes, if you want to join us in the live stream, come and do that as well. Okay. All right. Talk to you all next week.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.